Why was everyone staring? She could feel their eyes, the quiet judgment that cuts deeper than words. The kind of silence that tells you've already been sized up, measured, and dismissed. Had been in the prep school for less than 48 hours when she realized this place wasn't just about discipline. It was about survival. Not the kind that required weapons or body armor, but the kind that tested whether a person could stand alone when everyone else decided they didn't belong. She walked the narrow hallway of the cadet barracks, the scent of disinfectant and cold air clinging to the steel. Her boots echoed lightly, too light maybe, for someone they expected to command. The corridor was lined with recruits barely out of high school, all trying to act older than they were. None of them knew that the woman walking past had seen things that had stripped youth away years ago. She didn't correct their assumptions, not yet. "Hey, civilian." The voice came sharp, cutting through the quiet. Stopped, slowly turned. Cadet candidate Trent leaned against the doorframe of his barracks room, his arms crossed, jaw set in the self-assured defiance of someone who'd never been tested for real. Two others flanked him, the loud one, and Vega, the shadow who followed trouble because it was easier than thinking for himself. "You don't belong here," said, stepping forward, the corners of his mouth twisting like he enjoyed the sound of his own challenge. For a second nobody moved. The hallway was still, the hum of fluorescent lights, the faint rattle of pipes above. His breathing didn't change, her eyes didn't blink. She had heard those words before in another life. On sand, not tile, with the smell of burned cordite, not floor wax. "You don't belong here." It never got old, the arrogance of boys who thought strength came from noise. She didn't raise her voice. "Step back, candidate." He smirked. "Or what? You gonna file a report? You think a civilian contractor scares anyone here?" The other two laughed short, nervous. He shoved her shoulder lightly, testing her reaction. Her back hit the wall, the impact dull against the. Still, her expression didn't change. Not even a twitch. 8 years in the teams had taught her that control was power. "Lose your calm, lose the room." "5 seconds," she said quietly. He blinked. "What?" "You have 5 seconds to step back before this turns into something you'll regret." Something in her tone made glance sideways. There wasn't anger in it, just certainty, like someone describing the weather, predictable, inevitable. But before the tension could break, a voice came from down the hall. "Candidates, what the hell is this?" Captain rounded the corner, his presence filling the corridor like sudden gravity. The cadets snapped upright, stammering half-salutes, straightened too, eyes front. Gaze swept over the three men, then to her and back again. He didn't need an explanation, the scene spoke for itself. "Get back to your quarters," said, voice low, dangerous. Hesitated, tone sharpened. "Now, candidate." They scattered, boots against tile, the echo faded. Turned to her. "You okay?" Nodded once. "Fine, sir." "File a report, I'll handle it." He started to walk away but stopped. "You sure you're fine?" Her answer came steady. "Yes, sir." When he was gone, she stayed still for a few seconds longer, just breathing, letting the adrenaline settle. It was strange how calm she could be in moments that should shake in her. Maybe that was the problem. Maybe she had forgotten how to react like a normal person. That night in her small quarters near the gym, she sat at the edge of her bunk, tying and untying her bootlaces without thinking. The window was open slightly, the October air creeping in, cold enough to sting. She could hear the distant rhythm of cadence calls, young voices practicing discipline they didn't yet understand. She'd been out of the Navy 11 months, long enough to stop waking up expecting to hear mortars in the distance, not long enough to forget the sound of them. Her service record, if anyone had cared to read it, was thin on detail. Deliberately. 8 years as a SEAL combat medic meant most of what she'd done was buried in language like deployed in support of ongoing operations. But she remembered every name, every voice that called for her in those final seconds when the world was noise and dust and bleeding. She rubbed her thumb across the scar on her forearm, a small, pale line that no longer hurt but never stopped reminding her where she'd been. The prep school was supposed to be a fresh start, teaching, not fighting, building people instead of burying them. And yet here she was again, another battlefield, only quieter. The next morning the sky above West Point was a dull slate blue. She arrived at the training grounds before dawn, the field still wet with dew. Her breath came in soft white clouds as she set up cones, ropes, and sandbags. The silence was sacred, no orders, no shouting, no eyes on her, just the whisper of wind and her own rhythm. When the candidates arrived, she stood by the starting line with a stopwatch. They expected a drill instructor with bark and bluster. Instead, she gave them quiet authority, the kind that didn't need to prove itself. "Form up," she said, her tone was even. "Today we start with a conditioning circuit, rope climbs, tire flips, 2-mile run in full boots. You'll move as one. You'll finish as one." Snorted, "You mean we run like a CrossFit class?" A few chuckles followed, looked at him, expression flat. "You'll run like soldiers, or you'll run again." The laughter died. When the whistle blew, she watched them struggle through the course. They underestimated her, thought her pace and calmness meant softness. But when it was her turn to demonstrate, she moved through every station like muscle memory: rope climb, vault, crawl, sprint, efficient, quiet, surgical. By the time she finished, the same cadets who'd laughed before now stood silent, watching. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. But later that day, in the locker room, she overheard S's voice again, low, bitter. She must practice that for weeks, probably rigged the setup too. Laughed nervously. Vega didn't say much. There was always one like him, the follower, the quiet accomplice who pretended neutrality was safety. Didn't confront them. Not yet. She learned long ago that respect earned under pressure lasted longer than respect demanded by rank. That evening, as the sun dropped behind the Hudson, she stood on the edge of the training field alone. The wind was colder now. She thought of her father, the man who taught her to swim in the icy lakes of upstate New York when she was 7. He used to say, "The hardest job in any crisis is staying useful when everyone else is panicking." He was right. That line had kept her alive more times than she could count. It was easy to be brave when everyone was watching, harder when no one believed in you. Over the next week, tension thickened like fog. Kept testing limits, snide comments during formation, mock salutes when she walked by. He was the kind of young man who needed to feel taller by making others smaller. Every class had one. The difference was, this one didn't realize who he was picking a fight with. His focus never wavered. Every command she gave was crisp, deliberate. Every movement she made said control. The cadets started noticing. Some whispered that she moved like someone who'd been through something. Others just avoided her gaze altogether. But couldn't leave it alone. The insecurity in him had nowhere to go but outward. The second week, after evening drills, walked back toward the instructor's office. The hallway was half-lit, echoing with distant noise. She could feel it before she saw it, that tension, that change in air pressure that soldiers learn to sense before a confrontation. And there they were, Vega standing in the narrow corridor waiting. He stepped forward, blocking her path. His eyes weren't mocking now, they were something else, pride mixed with frustration. "You think you're better than us, don't you?" he said. "Coming here like you've got something to prove." Didn't answer. Silence was her oldest weapon. He stepped closer. "This place is for soldiers, real ones, not civilians cashing checks." She could smell his nervous sweat under the cologne. The other two shifted uneasily behind him. "Step back, candidate," she said quietly. Her voice was low, but it carried. He pushed her again, harder this time. The impact wasn't pain, it was memory. The dusty corridor of a compound in Afghanistan, A local security guard, armed, unpredictable, leaning too close, testing her patience. She handled that moment without raising a fist. She could handle this one too. She straightened, looked him in the eyes, calm, unblinking. 5 seconds, she said again. That's all you get. His mouth opened, but before he could speak, Captain's boots thundered down the hall. What's going on here? The cadets snapped to attention, guilt flashing like light across their faces. Get to your quarters now. They obeyed fast. Waited until they were gone, then looked at her. You okay? She nodded, yes, sir. Report it, don't let this slide. He left her standing there in the quiet. Her heart rate had barely changed. That night she stared at her reflection in the mirror. For a second, she didn't see the prep school instructor. She saw the combat medic from years ago. The same eyes, different uniform. The world had changed, but the battle was always the same. She whispered to herself like a promise. Control the noise, do the work, stay useful. And then, almost as if to the ghost she carried, I still belong here. Outside, the wind picked up. The flag by the parade field snapped in the cold. Somewhere, a group of cadets shouted cadence under the floodlights, their voices young and certain. Listened, then turned away from the window. Tomorrow, she would be back on the field before dawn. And the same boys who doubted her would learn, slowly, quietly, that real strength doesn't need to announce itself. It just shows up. And keeps showing up. No matter who's watching. How do you teach discipline to people who still believe the world owes them understanding? That question stayed in his mind as she stood on the frozen field the next morning, stopwatch in hand. Her breath turned white in the October air, soft and rhythmic. Behind her, the sky was barely awake, a smear of dull light over the Hudson, the kind of dawn that looked like it was still deciding whether to rise or stay hidden. The candidates formed up slowly, boots dragging, faces half asleep. She called roll. Her voice, calm and precise, cut through the chill. Here. Here. Vega. Here, ma'am. They couldn't look at her, not after the previous night. The silence between them was heavier than the cold. Captain had filed his report, formal, procedural, sterile. The kind that said, disciplinary review pending. 2 weeks of lost privileges, written admonition, nothing more. Didn't ask for more. She didn't want punishment, she wanted understanding, though she knew that, too, couldn't be taught through paperwork. Some lessons had to sting deeper. She blew the whistle. The first group launched into rope climbs, the sound of labored breathing echoing through the empty morning. Paced slowly between lanes, correcting form, calling out encouragement where needed. Her tone stayed even, detached but never unkind. She believed in balance, firmness without humiliation. But she could still feel eyes on her. The resentment coiled beneath the surface like a wire waiting to snap. When the session ended, she dismissed them with a curt nod. Tomorrow, same time. Bring discipline, not excuses. They scattered toward the mess hall, boots slapping against frozen mud. Only one cadet lingered. He hesitated before approaching. Ma'am. Turned, one brow raised. I just wanted to say sorry for what happened. Gets carried away sometimes. Her gaze stayed level, and you follow. He swallowed. Sometimes it's easier than standing alone. For the first time that morning, something softened in her expression, not quite sympathy, but recognition. She understood the weight of silence, the cowardice of watching wrong things happen because you're afraid to be the next target. Easier doesn't mean better, she said quietly. If you want to lead someday, start by doing the hard thing when no one's watching. He nodded, ashamed, and walked off. Watched him go. The wind picked up again, pushing through the trees that lined the perimeter fence. She adjusted her jacket collar and exhaled slowly. Maybe she was too hard on them. Maybe. But the battlefield didn't reward softness, and she wasn't here to raise soldiers who flinched when things got unfair. Later in the office, she finished her after-action report. The words blurred a little on the screen. Her fingers hesitated over the keyboard. For a brief second, she saw not the prep school, but the combat outpost in Afghanistan, the cramped medical bay, the metallic scent of blood and dust, the sound of rotors fading into silence after a medevac. She blinked hard, shaking it off. Focus. The past had its claws, but it didn't get to write her story anymore. At noon, she grabbed coffee from the staff lounge, stale, burned, but hot. A few of the other instructors were there. Sergeant Lee from the obstacle course team, Master Gunnery Sergeant Torres from physical conditioning. They nodded politely, but conversation slowed when she entered. That part never changed. The quiet distance between those who'd seen war and those who only trained for it. They respected her, but they didn't know her, and she didn't blame them. "Morning," Torres said, pouring sugar into his mug. "Heard about the incident, you good?" "I'm fine," she said, stirring her coffee. "Good, cadet's got a reputation. Needs a lesson in humility." "He'll get it," she replied. Torres chuckled. "Wouldn't want to be in his boots when you're done." Smiled faintly but didn't answer. Humility wasn't something you could force. It had to be earned, usually the hard way. That night she stayed late in the gym. The others had gone home hours ago. She moved through her own circuit, push-ups, rope climbs, ruck lifts, each motion deliberate, controlled. She wasn't training for war anymore, but the body remembered habits long after orders ended. Halfway through, she caught her reflection in the mirrored wall, the scar on her forearm pale under the fluorescent light. The braid streaked with a few new strands of gray she hadn't noticed before. 31 years old, 8 of them spent in the teams, 11 months out, and she still didn't know what normal felt like. When she'd left the Navy, she thought she'd be able to rest, to slow down, maybe teach others how to survive without needing to prove she still could. But the truth was simpler and lonelier. She didn't know who she was without the chaos. She sank onto the gym floor, back against the wall, breathing steady. The silence pressed in, thick and comforting at once. Her father's voice surfaced, a memory, faint but familiar. "Don't waste your energy convincing people you belong. Just do the work. The rest catches up eventually." He had been right about everything, and she'd never told him enough times that she knew it. Outside, the wind howled softly across the field. Somewhere in the distance, she heard laughter, cadets in their dorms, free from structure for the night. It almost sounded innocent. Almost. The following morning came colder. Frost bit at the corners of the field. Arrived early, running laps alone. It surprised her, not the effort but the timing. Maybe guilt had finally started to work, or maybe he was trying to prove something. She walked up beside him as he caught his breath near the pull-up bar. "Good morning, candidate." He didn't meet her eyes. "Morning, ma'am." "You running to think or running to hide?" His jaw tightened. "Just running." She nodded. "Keep it up. You've got work to do." He glanced up, finally meeting her gaze. "I'm not like you." "No," she said simply. "You're not. But you could be better if you stop pretending toughness means talking louder than everyone else." He didn't answer. She walked away, but he watched her go, confusion replacing defiance. The rest of the week passed without incident, but tension lingered like smoke. The other cadets whispered about what had happened, though few knew the truth. Rumors spread fast in closed environments, and in this one, mystery was its own gravity. Who is she really? Maybe CIA. No, I heard she was a trainer for Delta. Bro, she's like too calm, that's weird calm. Ignored it all, let them wonder, let them talk. The less they knew, the more they'd listen when it mattered. Friday morning, Captain called her into his office. The air smelled of stale coffee and paperwork. He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit." She did. "I reviewed your report. You handled it correctly, but I want you to know these kids, they're not soldiers yet. They're scared. They hide it under arrogance." Nodded slowly. Fear wears a lot of disguises, sir. Studied her a moment. You've seen more than most of us will ever see. I get that. But they don't. They see a civilian with authority and they push until it pushes back. I'm not looking for respect, sir, she said. Just effort. He smiled faintly, spoken like someone who's led before. She didn't respond. He didn't press. Some silences deserve to stay sacred. As she left his office, the intercom buzzed with a new announcement: upcoming evaluation drill Saturday morning. Full combat fitness sequence. Domain. She looked at the schedule pinned on the wall: 12-mile ruck, water survival, timed obstacle course, evaluation grade standards. A small, knowing smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. This would be their real test, not just of strength, but humility. Saturday came fast. The prep school grounds buzzed with early energy. Cadets loaded rucks, tightened boots, adjusted gear. Stood by the start line, clipboard in hand, the low hum of anticipation vibrating in the air. Then a shadow crossed her path. A figure in navy khaki approached, posture too familiar to mistake. Morning instructor. She froze for a heartbeat, not from fear but recognition. Chief. He was older now, silver in his beard, the same calm authority she remembered from. The man who used to lead with the quiet certainty that made chaos seem manageable. She hadn't seen him in years, not since her last deployment. Chief, she said, standing, didn't expect to see you here. Came to observe training. The prep school invited a few from Naval Special Warfare to review methods. He smiled slightly. Didn't know you'd be the one running the show. Contractor now, teaching PT. He looked out at the cadets stretching on the field. They have no idea who's teaching them, do they? Shook her head, doesn't matter. He chuckled, maybe it will by the end of today. For the first time in months, she felt something close to warmth in her chest, the rare comfort of being seen by someone who didn't need explanations. As the first whistle blew, she called the cadence. The candidates moved out with the heavy rhythm of boots striking earth. The evaluation had begun. Walked among them, same 40-pound ruck on her shoulders. She wasn't there to watch, she was there to endure with them. Her breath steady, her pace unwavering. Trailed ahead, pushing hard, maybe too hard, pride still driving him more than focus. Noted it, said nothing. They reached the halfway mark. The river mist rolled low across the path, coating their sleeves with cold dew. Her lungs burned, but she didn't slow. The body knew what to do, it always had. Watched from the command tent, arms crossed, a faint smile under his mustache. He'd seen that stride before, 2015, when everything went to hell and she didn't flinch once. He turned to, she's good. Nodded, yeah, better than most of us. His eyes narrowed, you have no idea. As the march ended and the next phase began, water survival, the cadets lined up, shivering, nervous. Most had never done this in full gear. Stood at the edge of the pool, hair tied back, whistle between her fingers. 50 meters swim, 5-minute tread, 10-pound retrieval. In uniform, begin on my mark. She didn't hesitate. She stepped into the water first. Cold, brutal, familiar. And as she sank beneath the surface, her thoughts drifted briefly to a memory she never shared. A night in a foreign desert, a flooded culvert, a wounded teammate who couldn't swim. Her hands pulling him up, lungs screaming, everything burning but the mission never stopping. When she resurfaced, the air was sharp and clean. She blinked water from her eyes and called, go. The cadets followed. Some faltered, some fought. But for the first time they were quiet, no jokes, no arrogance, only focus. And that finally was progress. How long can you hide who you really are before truth decides to walk out on its own? That thought followed as she watched the cadets climb out of the freezing water, breath ragged, eyes wide from exhaustion. The pool deck shimmered with droplets under the cold morning light. Steam rose from the surface like ghosts of effort. Sat at the edge, chest heaving, his arms trembling as he unlatched his wet boots. He'd passed barely. Had needed help out of the pool, coughing hard but proud that he hadn't quit. Vega, quieter than both, still sat in the shallow end, shaking his head, whispering to himself. Knelt beside him. "You did better than you think," she said softly. He looked up, surprised. "Didn't finish the tread." "You stayed in longer than fear told you to. That's the real test." He nodded, not sure how to answer. She stood, motioning him to grab his gear. The final phase, the obstacle course, was next. It was always the breaker, the point where pride either hardened into purpose or cracked into defeat. By now, word had spread that a visiting SEAL chief was observing. The cadets whispered, straightening uniforms, checking straps. Everyone wanted to impress him. No one realized the real test had already begun, not against the stopwatch, but against themselves. Walked toward the course entrance, Chief waiting by the timer's stand. He looked at her and smiled, that quiet, knowing kind of smile that said, "You've got this." She returned it faintly, then turned to face the line of candidates. "You've all trained for this," she said, voice even. "Today isn't about who's the fastest. It's about who refuses to stop when the body says quit. You're going to learn what endurance really feels like." His jaw flexed. He looked straight ahead, refusing to glance at her. Called the first name, "You're up." The cadet stepped forward, full of coiled energy. He tore through the first section fast, rope climb, low crawl, balance beam. His pace was aggressive, almost frantic. When he hit the final wall, he stumbled on the landing but kept going, crossing the finish line at 8 minutes and 12 seconds. He bent over, gasping, then looked toward. "Beat that." A few cadets laughed, half nervous, half admiring. Glanced at the timer, expression unreadable. 8:12, not bad. One by one, the others went, some solid, some struggling. The air filled with the mix of grunts, shouted encouragement, and the metallic clang of obstacles. When the last cadet cleared the finish line, looked across the group. "One more run, instructor." Heads turned. Paused, surprised not by the request but by the attention that followed. She hadn't planned to run. Instructors didn't need to prove anything, but eyes said otherwise. He wanted them to see. She stepped forward, adjusted her gloves, and nodded toward him. "On your mark." He raised the whistle. "Go." And just like that, the calm became motion. She exploded off the start line, her stride precise, deliberate, each movement refined by years of muscle memory. Her body remembered the rhythm, the seamless transitions from obstacle to obstacle, conserving energy where others wasted it. The world narrowed to breath and timing. Rope climb, 2 pulls, 1 swing. Wall vault, clear, land, roll. Sandpit, low crawl, steady pace, exhale. The wind bit at her face, but her focus stayed sharp. She could hear faint murmurs behind her, disbelief, or maybe even respect. When she cleared the final wall, she didn't sprint. She glided, controlled, efficient. Chief stopped the timer, looked at the screen. 6 minutes 41 seconds, he said calmly. Silence. Every cadet stood frozen, the disbelief thick enough to feel. Looked at them. "You just watched something most of you will never see again. That," he pointed toward, "is what mastery looks like under pressure." Caught her breath slowly, hands on her knees. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She just stood straight and waited for to speak again. He turned back to the group. "You all think you know what service means, what sacrifice looks like. Let me tell you something, instructor isn't just a fitness coach. She's a former Navy SEAL combat medic, 8 years with Team 3, 4 deployments to Iraq and Afghanistan, treated casualties under fire while you were still learning how to tie your boots." The air changed. His jaw dropped. Vega blinked. Expression cracked, confusion, then shame, then something closer to disbelief. Continued, voice low but carrying across the field. "Some of you thought she didn't belong here, that she was just another civilian collecting a paycheck. I suggest you think again, because she's earned the right to stand anywhere she damn well pleases." The cadet stood in stunned silence, said nothing. The reveal wasn't her idea, but she let it land. She looked at their faces, the embarrassment, the curiosity, the slow transformation of arrogance into respect. Didn't move. He stared at the ground, breathing hard, his knuckles white around his belt. Clapped his hands once. Debrief at 0900, dismissed. The group dispersed slowly, whispering as they went. Some glanced at like seeing her for the first time. Others couldn't meet her eyes at all. When the field emptied, walked over, handing her a towel. "Hope you don't mind me telling them." She shook her head. They needed to hear it. He studied her face for a moment. "You've changed." "So have you," she said softly. "Still can't sleep before sunrise," he added with a small grin. "Still drink too much coffee," she shot back. They both laughed quietly, the kind of laugh only people who'd been through something shared. Then his tone shifted, gentler. "You ever think about coming back? We could use instructors like you at, someone who remembers what it's really about." She exhaled slowly, eyes drifting toward the horizon. "I think about it, but I'm not sure I have anything left to prove." "Maybe not to them," he said, "but maybe to yourself." That stayed with her. Later that afternoon, she sat on the bleachers as the cadets cleaned gear. The sun hung low, gold spilling across the field. She could hear snippets of their conversations, her name, her past, fragments of awe. "A SEAL for real. Combat medic," they said. No wonder she crushed that course. But it wasn't pride she felt. It was something quieter, heavier. Recognition was fine. Understanding, that was rarer. Found her as the field emptied. "Chief just submitted his evaluation. He's recommending you for a senior instructor slot, special warfare preparatory training program. It's a hell of a thing." Looked at him surprised. "That's Navy side." "Apparently they still claim you," he said with a half smile. "Offers yours to take or ignore." She nodded slowly, unsure what to feel. Part of her had spent a year trying to escape that identity. The other part, the quieter one, missed the simplicity of knowing her purpose. That night her phone buzzed with an unknown number. She hesitated before answering. A familiar voice on the other end. "Heard you made quite the impression." She smiled faintly. "Chief, you already saw the report." "Yeah, but I wanted to say it myself. You remind me of what this uniform's supposed to mean." "Appreciate that. Don't wait too long to decide," he added. "You belong where people understand your silence." When the line went dead, she sat for a long time staring at the dark window. Her reflection looked back, same eyes, same calm, but something in them had shifted. The next morning before dawn, she stood at the same spot on the training field. The sky above was bruised gray, streaks of pale orange bleeding through. She closed her eyes, breathing in the cold. She thought of her father again, the way he'd taught her to stay calm underwater, how to find stillness when the world around you thrashed. He used to say, "Strength isn't loud, it's steady, the kind that doesn't care if anyone's watching." She opened her eyes. The air was sharp and alive. Behind her, footsteps approached. Alone, hands in pockets, posture stiff. "Ma'am," he said quietly. She turned, "Candidate." He took a slow breath. "I didn't know." "I know. I said things I shouldn't have, did things I shouldn't have." Her voice stayed soft. "Assumptions are easy to make, harder to outgrow." He nodded, shame burning his cheeks. I thought you were." "You thought wrong," she said gently. "The good news is you can learn from it." He hesitated, then looked up. "How do you do it, stay calm like that?" Studied him for a long second. "You don't wait for calm," she said. "You make it, one breath at a time." He absorbed that, the kind of answer that lingers longer than it explains. "Thank you," he said quietly. "Don't thank me, just lead better next time." He gave a short nod, then walked off. She watched him go, a strange, quiet peace settling over her. Not victory, not vindication, just peace, the kind that comes from being understood finally, even by the ones who'd once doubted you. The following week, an email arrived in her inbox. From Naval Special Warfare Preparatory Division. Subject, instructor position, formal offer. She read it twice, then once more. Outside, the morning sun rose higher, burning the frost off the field. She closed her laptop and walked outside, standing at the edge of the course. The rope swayed gently in the wind. The air smelled of earth and effort. Maybe the world didn't owe her understanding, but she owed herself one last mission, the kind that didn't involve bullets or sand, just the courage to keep showing others what quiet competence looked like under pressure. And as the sun climbed, she smiled faintly. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. What does it mean to go back, when the place you're returning to no longer feels like home? Sat in her apartment 2 nights after receiving the email, the glow from her laptop casting soft light across the small room. The screen still displayed the offer, formal, polished, impersonal. We are pleased to invite you to join the Naval Special Warfare Preparatory Training Program as a contract instructor, effective November 12. Her fingers hovered over the trackpad, but she didn't click accept. Not yet. Outside, rain tapped gently against the window, the kind of rain that softens everything: sound, thought, memory. She leaned back in her chair, exhaling through her nose, eyes unfocused. Return to the teams, to the culture, the rhythm, the ghosts. She had left that world because it demanded too much presence, too much distance, too much of herself. Out there, survival wasn't just about staying alive. It was about learning how to disappear into the mission until there was nothing left to bring home. Now they were calling her back, not to fight, to teach. But even teaching in that world meant stepping back into the fire she had spent a year learning to live without. Her phone buzzed on the table. She didn't need to look. She knew who it was. "Go ahead," she said softly, answering. Chief's voice came through, rough with fatigue and caffeine. "Tell me you said yes." "Still thinking." He exhaled. "You've been thinking your whole life. Sometimes you just need to move." She smiled faintly. "You never change. Good habits don't die easy." Silence hung for a beat, the kind that carried memory instead of words. "You remember?" he asked finally. She laughed quietly. "I try not to." "Fair, but I remember something you said after that night raid after we lost. You said, the hardest part isn't the mission, it's what happens after it. You were right." She rubbed her temple slowly. "What's your point?" "Maybe this is your after it. Maybe this is where you learn what to do with everything you carried." He paused. "The job's waiting. You don't have to come back for us, but maybe you need to come back for you." When the call ended, she sat there for a long time, staring at the reflection of herself in the dark window. The rain had stopped. The silence pressed in, gentle, heavy, familiar. The next morning, before the sun rose, she drove to the training field one last time. The gate guard nodded her through without question. She parked near the obstacle course and stepped out, boots crunching against wet gravel. The air smelled like mud and pine and cold steel. She ran the course again, alone this time. No stopwatch, no cadets, no audience, just her and the rhythm of breath and motion. Every movement felt like a conversation with memory, the muscle's quiet way of saying, "I remember who we were." When she cleared the final wall, she stopped and turned toward the rising horizon. The first light of morning painted the world gold. The air shimmered with something between closure and possibility. By the time she reached her car, she'd made her decision. She clicked accept offer. Smelled like salt and jet fuel. The Naval Special Warfare Center hadn't changed much in 11 months. Same clean lines, same faint hum of precision beneath the California sun. The gates opened at her arrival, security checks smooth and wordless. She parked near the training compound, stepped out, and let the Pacific wind push against her face. For a moment she just stood there, eyes closed, breathing deep. The sound of surf in the distance, shouts of candidates on the grinder, boots hitting pavement in perfect rhythm. It was all so familiar, too familiar. Met her near the command office, clipboard in hand. Welcome home. She gave a dry laugh. Home, debatable. He smirked. Fair, but the team's glad you're here. The younger instructors could use someone who remembers the difference between toughness and cruelty. She raised an eyebrow, still teaching that lesson. Still trying. He handed her the schedule. You'll be shadowing the Bud S Prep instructors this week. Next week you'll have your own block, combat conditioning, med training, situational stress management. Same stuff you used to teach in the field, minus the bullets. Scanned the schedule, then nodded, understood. Watched her for a second, then said quietly, You nervous? Not about the job. About the ghosts. She looked up, always. The first day back hit her harder than she expected. Rows of candidates in navy blue PT shirts, buzzed hair, faces tense with the strain of trying to look unbreakable. They looked like ghosts of her own past, younger versions of the same people she'd trained beside, patched up, buried. She kept her expression neutral. Good morning, candidates, she said, voice steady. I'm instructor. For the next 6 weeks, I'll be responsible for your conditioning and medical readiness. That means your lungs, your legs, and your ability to think clearly when your body wants to quit. No one spoke. A few shifted their weight. She paced slowly in front of them. You think you're here to get stronger. You're wrong. You're here to get honest about what you can handle and what you can't. Strength comes later. Truth comes first. The silence deepened. Stood at the back, arms crossed, hiding a faint smile. Get on the ground, she said finally. The candidates dropped to plank position, the sound of boots and breath filling the air. Hold it, she commanded. No talking, no shaking. Minutes passed. Muscles trembled. Sweat hit concrete. She watched carefully who panicked first, who looked sideways, who refused to drop their eyes. Then she said softly, You'll never win against gravity. You'll never beat exhaustion. The only thing you control is how you meet them. The whistle blew. Recover. They collapsed onto the ground, panting. Stepped forward, whispering near her ear as she jotted notes on the clipboard. You still have it. She smirked. I never lost it. Later that evening, she walked along the beach alone. The Pacific stretched out infinite and dark, the horizon bleeding into twilight. She kicked off her boots, let her toes sink into the cold sand, and listened to the tide roll in and out like breath. It was strange how time folded in on itself here, how 11 months of distance evaporated under the weight of familiarity. She knelt, picked up a small shell, and turned it over in her fingers, smooth, worn down by persistence, not force. Her father would like that metaphor. She remembered something he told her once when she was young and afraid of diving too deep. The ocean doesn't care how strong you are. It only cares how calm you can stay. She built a life around that idea, and maybe that was why she was back, to teach calmness in a world that noise. As the sky darkened, her phone buzzed. A message from Captain. Cadet graduated top of his class, said to tell you thanks. She smiled faintly. That was enough. She didn't need medals or speeches, just quiet proof that she'd made a difference somewhere between the shouting. Weeks passed. Her new trainees learned quickly that she wasn't loud, but she was relentless. They began to mirror her tone, less talk, more focus. The noise of ego faded. The rhythm of discipline took its place. One afternoon, during a medical field drill, a trainee froze. Blood, fake but realistic, poured from a training dummy's leg. The candidate's hands shook, eyes wide. Can't do it, he muttered. Knelt beside him. You can, you just think you can't. He looked up panicked. It feels real. That's the point. She placed her hands over his, guiding the tourniquet into place. Breathe. Focus on the next move, not the fear. He followed her lead. The bleeding stopped, simulated but precise. His breathing slowed. When he looked at her again, his eyes had changed. Something new flickered there, trust. She stood. Good, now teach the next man. That's how we pass it on. As the drill continued, watch from the side, arms folded, nodding to himself. Later, he joined her by the supply table. You see what you just did? Ran another class through basic trauma, she said. He shook his head. No, you taught them control. You taught them how to make calm contagious. Looked out across the field, watching the candidates work together, their movements more synchronized now, their voices quieter. Maybe that's enough, she murmured. That night she returned to her quarters on base, small, simple, functional. She hung her jacket on the rack, sat on the edge of the bed and let herself breathe. It was late, but sleep didn't come easily. It never had. She stared at the wall where her father's old dive knife hung in its sheath, the only keepsake she'd carried through every deployment, every move, every phase of her life. She reached for it, running her thumb along the dull edge. You were right, Dad, she whispered. It's not about surviving anymore. It's about teaching them how to. Her eyes burned, but she didn't cry. She just sat there silent, the room heavy with ghosts that no longer frightened her. Outside, a faint wind stirred the flag on the pole near the compound gate. It flapped once, then settled still, proud, deliberate. And in that moment, felt something she hadn't felt in years, not peace, not victory, but purpose. The kind that doesn't fade when the noise dies down. The kind that lives quietly in the people you train to take your place. How do you train others to be fearless, when fear is the only thing keeping you human? Stood on the shoreline before sunrise, boots sinking into the damp sand. The horizon was just beginning to bleed gold, the kind of quiet beauty that never made it into recruitment videos. The candidates were assembling behind her, their silhouettes moving like dark shapes against the dawn. The Pacific was cold, always cold. It bit at the ankles, crawled up the bones. The water drills weren't meant for strength, they were meant for truth. The ocean stripped away lies faster than any instructor could. Two-man teams, she said, her voice carrying over the wind. Raft recovery and rescue tow. You'll enter the surf at my mark. When you think you've had enough, stay 10 seconds longer. The group shouted acknowledgement, but one voice cut through, younger, sharper, almost eager. It belonged to candidate Holt, 19, lean, fast, eyes too bright for this place, the kind of brightness that burned itself out if you didn't teach it patience. Holt had only been in the program 2 weeks, but she already reminded too much of herself at that age, stubborn, driven, reckless with ambition. Always first to volunteer, last to quit, always trying to prove something invisible. Watched her adjust her gear at the edge of the surf, jaw clenched, shoulders squared against the cold. Candidate Holt said, stepping beside her, "You ready for this?" Holt nodded quickly. "Yes, ma'am, born ready." Almost smiled. No one's born ready, the ocean teaches that part. And then she blew the whistle. The surf exploded with movement. Candidates plunged into the water, gasping as the cold hit like a slap, walked parallel to the line, her eyes scanning every motion. She wasn't looking for speed. She was looking for control, the ability to move through panic instead of against it. At first everyone held form, then came the fatigue, the breathing, the small signs of cracking resolve. Holt pushed too hard. She pulled ahead of her partner, ignoring the synchronization drills. The raft flipped. Her partner swallowed water, flailing. His whistle cut the air like glass. "Freeze, Holt, eyes on me." The girl's head snapped up, drenched and panting. "Get your partner upright, now." To Holt's credit, she didn't argue. She grabbed the raft, righted it, hauled the struggling candidate aboard. Her movements were sloppy but determined. When she reached shore, she dropped to her knees, coughing seawater. Knelt beside her, voice low but firm. "You think speed makes you strong?" Holt shook her head, shivering. "No, ma'am." "Then why'd you act like it?" "I just wanted to do it right." "You wanted to do it first." Stood, her tone softening just slightly. "You'll learn first doesn't matter out there. Alive does." Holt's face flushed red, not from shame but recognition. Saw herself in that expression. The same hunger that had once driven her into places too dark to return from unscarred. "Dry off," she said quietly. "You're leading the next team." When turned away, was standing near the dunes, hands in his jacket pockets, watching. "You're harder on her than the others," he said as she approached. "She needs it." "She reminds you of someone," he said simply. Didn't answer, she didn't have to. That evening the base was quiet. Stayed late, reviewing training logs in the office. The hum of fluorescent lights filled the silence, steady and impersonal. She scrolled through performance notes, candidates improving, morale stable, weather conditions favorable, routine data. But then her eyes lingered on one name. Holt. Observation, exhibits initiative, lacks restraint, fails to communicate under pressure. She sighed. She knew where that road led. Too many names on memorial walls had started with the same strengths, the same flaws. She looked out the window. The Pacific shimmered under a half-moon. The wind rattled the flag outside, and for a moment she was somewhere else entirely. A night in 2017, a desert compound, the smell of smoke and adrenaline. "We've got a man down, medic, medic." Her breath caught. The voice in her head was too clear, too close. She could still see lying there, blood soaking into the dust. The same had mentioned weeks earlier. She'd done everything right, tourniquet, airway, chest seal, but some wounds don't wait for help. He had looked at her once before the light left his eyes, and said something she'd never repeated out loud. "You're not supposed to be here." It hadn't been an insult. It had been fear, the kind that makes you protect someone because they remind you of something good in a bad place. But she'd carried that line like a stone ever since. Her chest tightened. She shut the laptop, stood, and walked outside, needing air. The night was cold and clear. The surf rolled in slow and rhythmic, the same tempo as her pulse. She walked until her boots hit the wet sand, then sat down, arms resting on her knees. She whispered into the dark, "You were wrong, I was supposed to be there, just maybe not forever." The waves answered with their endless hush. The next morning the candidates assembled early. The sky was bruised gray, wind slicing through their uniforms. Another conditioning cycle, log carries, push-pulls, underwater breath holds. Stood with near the pool deck. He briefed the team while she watched the lineup, eyes sharp. Holt was there again, front row, determined, calm. Finished the safety rundown. "Remember, stay within your limits. Know the difference between discipline and denial." Then stepped forward. "All right, let's work." The first few minutes went smooth, synchronized dives, strong control. Then Holt's partner cramped mid-lane. Panic rippled through the water. Saw it instantly. She didn't shout, just dove. Cold punched her lungs. The world went blue, distorted, silent. She reached the struggling candidate in seconds, pulling him up, breaking the surface with a hard gasp. Holt was already there, trying to help. "Get the board," barked. The trainee scrambled to obey. Together they hauled the candidate out, his breath ragged but steady. Medical staff moved in fast, checking vitals. Minor hypoxia. He'd be fine. Stood dripping, water streaming off her sleeves. Holt stared at her, eyes wide. "You didn't even think," the girl said softly. "Didn't have to." "Were you scared?" Paused. "Always, but fear's not the enemy, Holt. It's the reminder you're still alive." Holt nodded slowly, something clicking behind her expression. Approached. "You all right?" "Fine," said, though her pulse was still hammering. He gave her that look, the one that saw through every deflection. He's okay, you did good. Not good, just my job. Smiled faintly, still can't take a compliment. She didn't respond. Later, as the team broke for chow, Holt lingered behind. Ma'am. Turned. I've been reading about combat medics. I didn't know you were, you know. Raised an eyebrow, a seal. Yeah, the others talk about it, but it's different hearing it from you. I wasn't special, said quietly. Just part of a team that needed someone to stop the bleeding. But you stayed calm, even today. That's what they needed. Calm's contagious. Holt nodded again, thoughtful. I want to learn that. Then you will, said and walked away. Behind her, the girl whispered, almost to herself, I hope I make it. Didn't turn around when she answered. You will, if you stop trying to prove you deserve to. That night the wind came in heavy off the ocean. Lay in her bunk, listening to it rattle the windows. The day's images looped in her mind, Holt's panic, the trainee's pale face, the cold. But deeper still, she saw again. Same look, same helplessness. She sat up suddenly, breath uneven. It had been years, but the body remembered trauma like an old song. She reached for her journal, something she hadn't opened in months, and wrote slowly, the words steadying her hand. Maybe redemption isn't about fixing the past. Maybe it's about refusing to repeat it. She closed the notebook, exhaled, and stared at the ceiling until sleep finally came. The next morning, Holt met her on the beach, unprompted. Ma'am, permission to train extra hours. Studied her face, no arrogance this time, just resolve. Why? Because I froze yesterday, Holt said. I don't want that to happen again. Nodded slowly. Meet me here at 1800. Bring your fins. We'll work until you stop hearing the word can't in your head. That evening, under the dim orange glow of the setting sun, the two of them swam laps in the cold surf. Over and over. No yelling, no stopwatch, just rhythm. When Holt started to tire, swam beside her. Stay with me, one more lap. The girl nodded through gritted teeth. Why are you here, Holt? To become one of them, she panted. Wrong answer, said. You're here to become someone who doesn't break when it's unfair. They hit shore, collapsing onto the sand, gasping. The waves hissed behind them. The sky had turned violet. Holt laughed through her exhaustion. I thought you were tough, you're worse than. Smiled faintly. He yells I don't have to. The girl grinned back. I'm glad you came back, ma'am. Didn't reply. She just looked at the horizon, the sun half buried in the sea, and thought, maybe so am I. That night, she wrote a single line in her journal. You can't save everyone, but you can teach them how to save themselves. And for the first time in years, she slept without dreaming. How many times can you face the same moment before it finally lets you go? The sky that morning was the color of metal, flat, heavy, waiting. The compound buzzed with the uneasy energy that comes before a major drill. Stood beside the equipment shed, arms crossed, watching the candidates gather near the assault course. Wind off the Pacific carried salt and tension. It was week 5 of the program's stress simulation day. Controlled chaos. Controlled, she kept reminding herself. Briefed the cadre. Sim rounds only, full protective gear, medical staff on standby. Instructors run overwatch. We want them to feel pressure, not panic. Nodded, scanning the setup. Barricades, smoke canisters, mock casualties, controlled detonations. She designed half of it herself, an echo of what real operations had once felt like, only cleaner, safer. At least it was supposed to be. Called, handing her a headset. You've got blue team, Holt's squad leader. Understood. When the whistle blew, smoke erupted across the field. The candidates charged through it, shouts muffled, shapes flickering in gray, jogged along the perimeter, calling corrections into the mic. Maintain spacing. Cover angles. Holt, keep your flank tight. Holt's voice crackled back. Copy. The first explosion thundered, harmless, concussive, but enough to rattle nerves. The team dove for cover, moved again. Everything unfolded as planned. Then something went wrong. A second detonation, closer, too close. A trainee on the left flank stumbled, dropping his training rifle. He fell awkwardly, clutching his leg. "Hold position," shouted. She sprinted forward through the haze. The kid, Martinez, 19, was on the ground, breathing fast, pale. The blood pooling under his knee wasn't from the paint rounds. A fragment of real shrapnel from a defective simulator had caught him just above the calf. For a heartbeat, the world narrowed. The smell of burnt powder hit her throat, and time folded backward. 2017. Night raid gone sideways, screaming, same color smoke, same smell. Pulse spiked, the edges of her vision blurred. Then training took over. She dropped to her knees beside Martinez, voice low, precise. "You're okay, stay still." Her hands moved automatically, gloves off, pressure on the wound, quick scan. Arterial minor, manageable. His voice crackled in her headset. "Talk to me." "Live injury, 1 casualty, stable airway, moderate bleed, need med to base clinic." "Copy, crews moving." Tore open a trauma bandage from her kit, wrapped it tight, anchored the tourniquet. The blood slowed. She kept pressure, counting under her breath. "Stay with me, Martinez," she said quietly. "Eyes open, you're doing fine." His gaze darted around, wild. "Am I gonna lose my leg?" "No, you'll walk out of here." He tried to laugh, choked instead. "Ma'am, you're calm as hell." "That's the job," she murmured. But inside she wasn't calm. She was back there again, dust, shouting, the echo of gunfire. On the ground, hand on her wrist, saying her name. She blinked hard, forcing the memory out. "Focus, you're safe." The med crew arrived within minutes, loading Martinez onto the stretcher. As they carried him away, jogged up, eyes scanning her face. "You all right?" She stood, wiping her hands on her fatigues. "Yeah." "You sure?" "Yeah," she repeated, but her voice betrayed the tremor she thought she'd buried. He studied her a second longer, then nodded. "He'll be fine. Freak equipment malfunction, not on you." She gave a stiff nod, turning away before he could read more than she wanted him to. That night the compound went quiet early. Training suspended pending review. Sat alone in the infirmary's empty hallway, still wearing the same uniform, now stiff with dried seawater and dust. The adrenaline had faded, leaving a hollow ache behind her ribs. She heard footsteps, again. He sat beside her without asking. "Martinez's surgery went smooth," he said. "Clean extraction. He'll be back on his feet in a month." Nodded but didn't answer. Leaned forward, elbows on knees. "You froze for half a second back there." She didn't deny it. "Yeah." He waited. Finally she said it. The smoke, the smell, it was the same as that night. She nodded once. Looked down, voice low. "We all carry that one, the moment we wish had gone different." "I thought I did." "Nobody outgrows ghosts. We just learn how to walk beside them." She exhaled, shaky but honest. "I hate that it still gets to me." He smiled sadly. "It should. That's what keeps you human." They sat in silence for a long time, the hum of fluorescent lights filling the space where words couldn't. The next morning ran alone before dawn, 6 miles along the shoreline, wind biting her cheeks, lungs burning. Every step was rhythm. Every breath was permission to keep moving. When she reached the halfway point, she stopped, bent over, hands on knees. The ocean roared in her ears like static. She whispered to herself, "It's over." But some part of her knew it never really would be. The job wasn't to forget. It was to function anyway. She jogged back toward base. By noon, the investigation was complete, confirmed mechanical fault. Training could resume. Called the cadre together. "We move forward," he said. "Martinez will recover. Let's make sure this doesn't happen again. When the group dispersed, stayed behind. I want to debrief with Holt's squad, she said. Already planned it, replied. They've been waiting. She found the candidates gathered in the classroom, somber, subdued. The incident had shaken them more than they wanted to admit. Holt stood up when entered. Ma'am, we wanted to ask, is Martinez okay? He's fine, said. Minor injury, he'll be back before you graduate. The relief was visible. But, she continued, what happened out there is why we train the way we do. You think discipline is about push-ups and miles. It's not. It's about staying functional when the world turns to static. Holt raised her hand tentatively. Ma'am, were you scared? Met her eyes. Yes, every second. The trick isn't to kill fear, it's to work with it. The room went silent. The trainees absorbed every word like oxygen. Fear keeps you alert. Panic kills people. Learn the difference. When she dismissed them, Holt lingered as usual. I saw you move out there. It was different. Tilted her head. Different how? You weren't thinking, you just were, like you'd done it 1,000 times. Smiled faintly, because I have. The girl hesitated. Do you ever stop seeing it, the blood? His voice softened. No, you just stop letting it decide who you are. That night rain hit the roof hard, rare for. Lay in bed listening, eyes open, thoughts loud. She replayed the day, the memory, the sound of his voice layered over Martinez's. The two blurred until she couldn't tell which belonged to the past. She sat up, swung her legs over the side of the bed, reached for her journal again. Fear isn't weakness, she wrote. It's proof that something still matters. She paused, then added, and maybe that's enough. Her handwriting looked steadier this time. The next morning the base looked washed clean. The rain had stripped the sky to a bright, impossible blue. Training resumed with quiet focus, no jokes, no wasted energy. Notice the change immediately. The candidates moved with more cohesion, more trust. Holt led with calm now, less shouting, more clarity. The lesson had settled where speeches couldn't. After drills approached her by the field, they're starting to mirror you. She shrugged, that good or bad? He grinned, depends on the day. She laughed softly, a real laugh, rare and quiet. You ever get tired of doing this, Chief? He thought for a moment. No, I get tired of forgetting why we do it, but not of the doing. Looked at the trainees again, young, unbroken, learning how to bear weight without cracking. Yeah, she said, that part I understand. Later she found herself back at the beach. The tide was low, the water clear enough to see the rippled sand beneath. She crouched near the shoreline, fingers tracing the edge where the ocean met land. She thought about how many times she'd tried to draw that line in her own life, between soldier and civilian, past and present, guilt and grace. Every time she did, the tide came back and erased it. Maybe that was the point. She looked up at the horizon, sunlight glinting off the waves. Somewhere out there, beyond sight, were all the places she'd left pieces of herself. And here, finally, was where they were starting to fit again. She whispered almost to the wind, you were right, Chief. Walking beside the ghosts, that's how we keep moving. The ocean answered in rhythm, rolling in, rolling out. For the first time in years, she smiled without hesitation. That evening she joined in the mess hall, rare for her. They ate quietly, both too tired for conversation. He raised his coffee mug halfway. To the ones who don't quit. Clinked hers against his. And to the ones who keep showing up anyway. They drank, the kind of toast that meant more than either admitted. Outside, the sunset burned the sky red and gold, light catching on the training obstacles still glistening from the rain. Tomorrow would come, with more drills, more noise, more ghosts. But tonight, just for a moment, everything was still. And stillness, she'd learned, was its own kind of victory. How do you know when it's time to stop proving you can still do the job? The email came before dawn, time-stamped 4:30. Subject, Joint Assessment Directive, Instructor Selection. Read it twice, coffee cooling beside her. The Navy and Army Special Operations Commands were coordinating a new Combined Forces evaluation. A test so demanding it made most instructors nervous just reading the outline. Knocked once and stepped into her office. Guess who's been volunteered? She sighed. Let me guess, someone with a calm voice and a record of surviving bad ideas. Exactly, he said, sliding into the chair across from her. They want you to run the endurance and leadership phase. Mixed branch candidates, media blackout, full oversight from command. Big deal. Scrolled through the details. 40 participants, 3 days. Terrain navigation, waterborne insertion, live fire coordination, casualty extraction. Nothing she hadn't seen before, but everything she thought she'd left behind. Went. 10 days. She leaned back, rubbing the bridge of her nose. That's soon. Watched her. You don't have to accept. You've earned your peace. Peace doesn't pay for itself, she said, half smiling. He chuckled. You sound like the old you. Maybe she never left, murmured. The next week passed in a blur of preparation. She reviewed maps, checked safety contingencies, tested radios, and hand-picked her assistant cadre, 3 younger instructors who moved with discipline but hadn't yet learned the weight of silence. Every night she told herself, this was just another mission in a different uniform. But deep down, something restless stirred. The morning of deployment, she stood on the airfield watching the C-130's engines spin to life. The horizon was pale pink, clouds stretched thin like gauze. She pulled her cap lower against the wind. Approached, handing her a sealed envelope. Command authorization, contingency protocols, emergency contacts. You'll do fine. You're not coming. He shook his head. They wanted fresh blood. I'm backup. Besides, someone has to keep these walls standing. She gave him a long look. You ever get tired of sending people back into the fire? Every time, he said, but I trust who I send. She nodded once, boarded the aircraft, and didn't look back. The training site sat somewhere along the Northern California coastline. Dense pines, cold surf, cliffs that fell away like broken stone. Remote enough that the wind carried only the sound of waves and orders. Briefed the candidates at sunrise. 3 days, no shortcuts. What matters here isn't strength, it's composure. You fail that, you fail everything. They listened. They always did at first. By afternoon, the course was in full motion. Teams carried 50-pound logs up muddy slopes, rappelled down cliff faces slick with rain, navigated through canyons by compass under simulated fire. Moved among them like a ghost, watching, correcting, pushing. Her voice stayed level, never shouting. Control your breathing. Don't fight the climb, flow with it. Pain's not the signal to stop, it's the reminder you're alive. When exhaustion hit, tempers flared. 2 Marines argued over navigation points. A sailor tripped and cursed the terrain. An Air Force trainee refused to carry his weight on the stretcher drill. Cut through the noise, enough. Her tone froze the air. You think combat cares what patch you wear. You think the enemy waits while you argue about who's right. They fell silent, mud dripped from helmets, hearts pounded in the quiet. Figure it out, she said softly, together. By nightfall they did. At 2300 she stood by the fire pit at base camp, clipboard in hand. The candidates slept in makeshift shelters, too tired to dream. The rain had stopped. The forest hummed with wind and distant surf. One of the junior instructors, Taylor, approached. Ma'am, you ever miss it, the real thing? Glanced up, define real. You know, missions, the adrenaline, the purpose. She smiled faintly. Adrenaline's not purpose, it's noise. He frowned, then what is? Doing the work when no one's watching. Taylor considered that, nodded slowly and walked off. She stayed there a while longer, staring into the fire until it burned down to coals. Day 2 began with fog so thick it muted everything. Visibility 10 meters at best, perfect for disorientation drills. Led the convoy along the ridge, radio crackling with updates. Somewhere below, the ocean churned unseen. Maintain line integrity, she ordered. No lights, no noise. Halfway through the descent, a shout cut through the mist. A rope snapped against rock. Man down. Pulse spiked. She dropped her pack and ran toward the edge. A candidate had slipped, nothing fatal, but he dangled 15 feet below the ridge, harness twisted. The cliff face crumbled with each movement. Hold still, she called, anchoring a safety line. The junior instructor moved to help, but she waved him back. I've got him. She clipped in, descended slowly, boots grinding against wet stone. Reach up, she said. The trainee's hand trembled, slick with rain. Ma'am, I can't. Yes, you can, eyes on me. He obeyed. She guided his hand to the carabiner, secured the rope, pulled him close. We're going up on 3. 1, 2. She heaved, muscles burning. The harness held. They cleared the ledge. The team grabbed the rope, hauling them over the lip. The candidate collapsed onto the ground, gasping. Stayed crouched, checking his pupils, breathing steady. You're fine, she said quietly. Scared but fine. He nodded, still shaking. Thought I was done. She met his eyes. Not today. His words echoed in her head from months before. We all carry that one moment we wish had gone different. Maybe this was hers, rewritten in mercy instead of loss. That night after the candidates slept, she walked alone to the cliff's edge. The fog had lifted, revealing a black expanse of ocean dotted with moonlight. The surf below hit the rocks in steady rhythm. She took off her cap, let the wind pull at her braid, and whispered into the dark, "You'd hate this view." Somewhere deep inside, the old guilt stirred, but softer now, almost gentle. She closed her eyes and listened to the sea. Day 3 began with exhaustion carved into every face. The final evolution, timed casualty extraction over 4 kilometers of uneven terrain. Stood at the starting point, stopwatch in hand. This is where you prove whether you've learned anything. You can't win alone. They started slow, clumsy, but by the halfway mark something changed. Voices steadied, footsteps synchronized. Teams stopped competing and started adapting. Jogged beside them, calling minimal cues. Breathe together, move together. When the last group crossed the finish line, she stopped the timer and looked around. Every face was caked in mud, eyes hollow but alive. Congratulations, she said. You didn't just finish, you endured. The applause that followed wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. That evening, command held a short debrief. The assessment was a success. 0 major injuries, cohesion off the charts. As the officers spoke, half listened. Her attention drifted to the window, where the horizon blazed orange against the darkening sea. When they dismissed her, she walked outside, letting the noise fade behind her. Was waiting by the transport jeep. He'd arrived mid-brief, as if he'd known she'd need someone familiar to absorb the silence with her. So, he said, how's it feel to be everyone's favorite legend again? She laughed softly. Legend's just a polite word for survivor. He nodded. True, still hell of a job. She looked back at the camp, the silhouettes of tents against the firelight. They'll be good soldiers, she said. Because of you. No, she said quietly, because they listened. Studied her. So what now? Stay on, take command. Hesitated. I don't know yet. You don't have to decide tonight. I know. They stood there for a long time, the sound of the surf rising behind them. Finally she said, Chief, do you ever wonder when it's time to stop? He thought about it. Every day. But stopping isn't the same as quitting. Sometimes it's just handing the torch before it burns through your hand. She smiled faintly. Maybe that's what this was. On the flight back to the cabin, lights dimmed. Most of the cadre slept, heads tilted, exhaustion finally catching up. Sat by the window, staring down at the dark Pacific below. She thought about the cadets, about Holt, about Martinez walking again, about the ghosts that had followed her from one coast to another and somehow grown quieter. Maybe was right. Maybe this wasn't about returning to who she'd been. It was about finally understanding who she'd become. She leaned back, closed her eyes, and for once, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt earned. When the plane touched down, the first light of morning spilled across the runway. She stepped onto the tarmac, inhaling the salt air that had once meant battle but now meant home. Met her with coffee and a grin, so back to routine. Took the cup, sipped, and nodded, back to teaching. He tilted his head, and after that. She smiled, we'll see. They started walking toward the compound as the sun climbed higher, the world waking around them. The new trainees would arrive in a week. More noise, more effort, more lessons. But for now, there was quiet, the kind that doesn't ask for attention. And finally, didn't feel like she was walking beside ghosts. She felt like she was walking with them. When the mission ends, what's left of the person who lived inside it? That question followed through the corridors of training compound like an echo that wouldn't die. The building smelled faintly of salt and machine oil. Boots clicked against polished floors. Orders floated through open doors. Life went on. It always did. She'd been back for a week since the joint assessment. Her body had healed from the bruises, but her mind hadn't settled. The silence no longer felt like rest. It felt like a question. Most evenings she lingered on the pier long after the sun dropped. The Pacific glowed black and copper, the horizon a razor-thin promise she never quite reached. The new class would arrive soon, another wave of young faces who didn't yet understand what discipline cost. She told herself she was ready to start again. Yet each time she heard the ocean break against the pilings, she felt a tug somewhere deep, the same quiet pull that had drawn her into the teams years ago. Not for glory, not for medals, just the need to matter. Called from the walkway one afternoon, breaking her drift. He wore his usual smirk, but the lines around his eyes looked heavier. "You got a minute?" "Always." He handed her a sealed folder. "Command wants you to consider something. Instructor advisor billet for the advanced phase. Overseas rotation, short term, 3 months in Jordan. Pays good, leadership wants continuity from the last assessment." She didn't open it. "That's a deployment, not an advisory." "Semantics," he said lightly. She gave a quiet laugh. "You ever get tired of trying to drag me back into the deep end?" He shrugged. "Some of us swim better there." They stood side by side, watching a team of trainees jog past on the grinder, cadence echoing off the walls. His tone softened. "Look, you'd be perfect for it. You understand tempo, risk, restraint. They could use someone who teaches calm instead of noise." "And what if I don't want to live inside the tempo anymore?" "Then you say no." She hesitated. "And if I say yes?" He met her gaze. "Then you'll remember who you are." She exhaled. "That's the problem, Chief, I already do." He nodded slowly. "Then maybe it's time to see what remembering looks like outside the uniform." That night she walked the beach alone. The tide was low, the moon caught in the wet sand like a broken coin. Each wave reached for her boots, then slipped back into itself. She pulled a small object from her pocket, the dive knife that had once belonged to her father. She carried it everywhere, not as a weapon but as a weight. The handle was smooth now, worn by years of use and the press of her thumb whenever she needed steadiness. She crouched and drove the blade point first into the sand. It stood upright, trembling in the breeze. "For a long time," she whispered, "I thought I had to keep proving I could still do it, that if I stopped moving I'd disappear." The wind lifted her words and scattered them toward the sea. "But maybe being still isn't the same as being done." She left the knife there and walked farther down the shore, letting the surf erase her footprints behind her. The next morning dawned clear. She met Holt near the obstacle field, the younger woman now an instructor in training, her confidence steadier, eyes sharper. "Morning, ma'am," Holt said, falling into stride beside her. "Lose the ma'am," replied. "You're earning the same ground I walk on." Holt grinned. "Can't promise that yet." They reached the rope climb, the same structure where had once outrun every cadet at West Point. She stared up at it, sunlight glinting off the metal rungs. "Ever think about quitting?" Holt asked suddenly. Smirked. "Every day. The trick is not to confuse quitting with choosing." Holt frowned. "What's the difference?" "One's fear," said, "the other's freedom." Holt nodded, not sure she fully understood, but storing it away like scripture. They spent the rest of the morning running drills. Holt barked orders with measured calm, catching mistakes before they grew into habits, watched quietly, correcting less, trusting more. When the session ended, Holt approached her again. "You going overseas?" Looked surprised. "Who told you?" "Mentioned it, said command wants you there." Studied her expression. "What do you think I should do?" Holt hesitated, then said carefully, "I think you already gave them enough. Maybe it's their turn to figure it out." Smiled. "You're getting wise too fast." "Just learning from the best," Holt said, and jogged off toward the mess hall. Watched her go, a quiet pride warming the place where regret used to live. Later that afternoon, she found in the office, sorting paperwork. She dropped the sealed folder on his desk unopened. "Decision?" he asked without looking up. "Yeah." "You even read it?" "No." He finally met her eyes. "You sure?" She nodded, for the first time. "Yeah." He leaned back, expression unreadable, then smiled. "You're allowed to stay still, you know. The world won't collapse without you." She laughed softly. "That's what I'm counting on." They shook hands, the gesture brief but heavy with years of unspoken things. Respect, memory, shared ghosts. As she turned to leave, called after her, "So what now?" "Now," she said, pausing in the doorway. "Now I live like there's more to me than the missions that tried to end me." He raised his mug in salute. "Useful." "Always," she said and walked out. Weeks passed. The compound filled with new trainees, new noise, new chaos. Stayed on as mentor but refused any official title. She spent her mornings running the beach, her afternoons teaching quiet lessons, how to breathe under pressure, how to read the wind, how to think slower when everyone else panicked. Her name spread through the ranks like rumor. The legend of the calm instructor who never shouted, who once outran an entire platoon and then told them the secret wasn't speed but patience. She didn't correct the stories. Some myths were harmless. In the evenings, she sat on the steps of the pier, notebook on her lap, jotting half-sentences that never turned into speeches. Peace isn't earned by walking away from battle. It's earned by learning not to start one inside yourself. Sometimes Holt joined her. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. The ocean did most of the talking. One night, as the sky folded into indigo and the base lights flickered on, Holt handed her a small parcel wrapped in cloth. "What's this?" he asked. "Found it on the beach last week," Holt said. "Thought it was yours." Inside was the dive knife, clean, polished, the blade catching the light like water. "You went looking for it." Holt shrugged. Didn't seem right to leave it behind. Ran her thumb along the handle. The initials engraved there, her father's, had faded almost to nothing. "Keep it," she said finally. Holt blinked. "Ma'am." "It's yours now. You'll understand when the time comes." The younger woman hesitated, then nodded. "I'll take care of it." Smiled. "I know." Months later, she received a letter, not from command but from Martinez, the trainee injured during the simulation. He made a full recovery, joined the Fleet Marine Force, and was finishing his first deployment. At the bottom he'd written, "You were right, fear's not the enemy. Thanks for teaching me how to breathe." Folded the letter carefully and slid it into her journal. Some rewards didn't need ceremony. On her last official day at the compound, she walked the perimeter one final time. The air was warm, the sky clear. She stopped by the rope climb, touched the first rung, and smiled. Holt spotted her from across the field, heading out. "Yeah, feels weird," Holt admitted. "It always does. You build a place, and then you leave it so someone else can make it better." They shook hands. Holt's grip was firm, confident. "You'll visit?" "Maybe," said, "but if I don't, that's how you'll know I trust you." Holt laughed, blinking back something she didn't want to show. Turned toward the gate. "Don't let them mistake quiet for weakness." "I learned from you," Holt said softly. Smiled without turning back. "Then you'll be fine." She walked through the gate, boots crunching on gravel, the wind pushing gently at her shoulders like an invisible farewell. That evening she stopped at the edge of the cliff overlooking the sea, the same view from her first return. The sun bled into the horizon, painting the waves gold. She breathed in the salt, the quiet, the proof that she was still here. No medals, no speeches, just air and memory and the steady pulse of a life reclaimed. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Thank you," though she wasn't sure to whom, her father, maybe the ocean itself. And when she opened them again, the world looked simple, balanced, whole. Because peace, she realized, isn't silence. It's the ability to carry the noise without letting it define you. She turned away from the ocean, heading down the path toward the small town beyond the base. The evening light caught the edge of her uniform, soft and golden. Somewhere behind her, the waves kept their rhythm, steady, eternal, unmoved. And in the fading light, her silhouette looked less like a soldier walking away and more like a person finally walking home. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.